The firm's decision problem. In this video, I describe the firm's decision problem. It's the one faced by a typical firm. I show that it's similar to that of the consumer. The firm seeks to maximize an objective, in this case profits, subject to constraints. Now, in this video, my ultimate aim is to reach the profit equation and to use it to shed light on the firm's decision problem. But before we do so, I need to introduce some concepts and definitions. So let's get started. There are two types of costs in economics. Explicit costs are those for which the firm makes a monetary payment. Examples include payments to labor or purchases of inputs. What you might think of in this case is that explicit costs, there's always a receipt. There's either a transfer of cash or there's a check or a receipt. The second type of costs that economists focus on are implicit costs. These involve resources for which there is no payment. There's not necessarily a transfer of cash, but the resources do have an alternative use. They could be used productively elsewhere. An important example in the case of the firm is the owner's time. Economists also have two different definitions of profits. In the first definition, known as accounting profit, it only includes explicit costs, those for which there are cash payments and receipts, and it's concerned mainly with the inflows and outflows of cash. The second type of profit is economic profit, and it's much more inclusive. It includes accounting profit, but so it includes explicit costs, but it also includes implicit costs. So it's much broader. By factoring in all the cost of resources, economic profit's a key indicator for determining whether or not the firm should continue in operation or whether it should release its resources so that they can be more productive elsewhere. The second concept looks a little bit complicated, but it's known as the production function. The production function shows the maximum amount of output that can be produced from a specified amount of inputs. Think of this as a recipe that the producers use to produce a product. The recipe tells them how much of particular inputs to take and to combine in order to produce output. To make this example more concrete, let's think about Mario, who's a sugarcane grower in El Salvador. So his production function for his farm would be expressed as the quantity of sugarcane produced as a function of the amount of the inputs. So it's a mathematical relationship, and so the amount of output produced depends on the quantity of labor, the quantity of physical capital that Mario hires or rents, and the quantity of land that he uses. Revenue is relatively simple, and revenue are the monetary receipts that Mario gains from the sale of his sugar. So if he produces a quantity QS of sugar and then sells it at a price per metric ton, say PS, then the total revenue he receives from selling this quantity is P times Q. Now, I'm going to go ahead and substitute in the previous relationship, the production function, and write revenue like this. And you'll understand later why I've done that. Of course, Mario has to pay for the inputs that he uses to produce sugarcane, so let's consider the total cost. Total cost is the sum of the payments Mario makes to the factors of production. Now, the factors of production in this case are land, labor, and physical capital. Now, if we look at the cost of employing land, we multiply the quantity of land, the number of acres or hectares used by Mario, times R sub t. R sub t represents the rental rate on land. So if Mario rents the land, then that's the rent that he pays for per hectare or per acre of land. The second component of cost are, of course, labor costs. And here we have the quantity of labor hired, Q sub L, multiplied by the wage per labor. And then lastly, we have the quantity of physical capital. Let's suppose also that Mario rents the tractors, rents trucks, rents the plows that he uses in his operation. And so this is the quantity of the physical capital, but this then is the rent per unit of physical capital. So his total cost then would be the sum, would consist of the sum of these expenses. Okay, now we're at the final point where we wanted to be. Now, as I wanted to emphasize, Mario's objective, like that of any other producer, is to maximize economic profit. And so let's see how economic profit is both shaped and influenced by both market and technological constraints. So let's look at the profit. Here is profit, written very generally. Now I've substituted in all those other, the terms that I developed earlier. Here we have revenue, and here we have total cost. Now this way of writing the profit function is especially illuminating because it really underscores the way Mario must contend with constraints, both from the market side and also technological. So let's look at the market constraints. Notice here the price of sugarcane. Mario would, of course, love to sell his sugarcane to his customers at the highest price possible, but he's constrained. He's constrained both by his competitors in the market and also by the customers. The customers, of course, won't purchase his sugarcane if the price is too high. And the other sugarcane growers in El Salvador are likely to supply the sugarcane at a lower price. So that's one of the first market constraints faced by Mario, who's attempting to maximize profit. The second constraint is reflected in the prices of the inputs or the factors of production. Mario, of course, would like to produce at the lowest possible cost. And in fact, he would like to hold down, say, the wage rate as low as possible, the rent on land, and also the rent for machinery. But but he's constrained again by the market. If he offers too low a rent or too low a wage rate, he may not get access to the inputs. And this could be crucial. In fact, in the case of sugarcane, we know that once you cut sugarcane, you have approximately 48 hours to get that sugarcane, that cut sugarcane and those stalks to the sugar mill, because the sugar content of the stalks deteriorates rapidly. But suppose Mario tries to bargain with the transporters of sugar from the farm to the sugar mill. It's possible that if he offers too low a wage rate, they may not work for him, and he could lose the entire crop because it's lost its sugar content. So Mario, in maximizing profits, faces market constraints. Now let's look at the other important constraint that he has, and that's reflected right here in the production function. So he faces market constraints, but also technological constraints. Mario, of course, would like to have some sort of futuristic technology where he can get the maximum output of sugarcane without really using any inputs. Magically he gets production. But the reality is that he's constrained by the existing technology, and in order to produce output, he needs to use inputs. And he must use them in particular ways. That's what the production function tells us. Remember, that's the recipe for how to combine the inputs and to produce output. Now, later on in the course, we are in this particular section, we are going to develop, for this first part of the week, we are going to develop the properties of the production function. Later, Kara will focus on the on the costs that the producer faces when he or she attempts to produce more. So, as you can see then, the producer, just like the consumer, has an objective, that is, maximize profit, but the producer, in this case Mario, is constrained by market and technological conditions. So let's recap. In this video, we demonstrated that the firm's decision problem is similar to the one faced by the consumer. Like the consumer, the firm seeks to maximize an objective subject to constraints. In the producer's case, however, the goal is to maximize profits subject to market and technological constraints.